Hey, FrightFest television here, and one of our big successes of FrightFest this year, 2011, is of course the Theatre Bazaar. And we're here with 3 directors of the anthology, plus Simon Boswell, who wrote a couple of the tracks with it. So basically, Mr. David Gregory, I'm going to ask you, because you're the inception of the film, more or less, so tell me how it all began.
It all began while I was editing a featurette on the movie Aria, which is an art house omnibus movie. And I thought this would be so much better if it was the same concept but a horror movie. And basically the idea was to give the same budget to a bunch of filmmakers and give them just a really kind of vague, enveloping idea. And in this case, it would be something that would play in a Grand Guignol theatre. And I called up some filmmakers that I knew, they called up filmmakers they knew, and we ended up with a really excellent roster of filmmakers to basically have complete creative freedom to deliver something that would play in this Grand Guignol theatre.
Was it just a basic, the fact that you had a want list and you went down it and just see who was available, or was it a case of they were available and so it was fine? In a way that doesn't make that sound so terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, most of the people that I asked about it came on board. Karim was the first person that I approached about it because I just met him recently at another film festival, and we discussed the idea, and he said sounded like a good one. He said I should call Doug Buck because he knew him and had worked with him a lot, and said that he would be perfect for something like this. And I'd seen Family Portraits, his other omnibus film, which was fantastic, and everybody else just kind of came in after that. I mean, yes, there was a list made, but it was a fairly short list, and most of the people that I approached were into the idea.
Well, I mean, Karim Hussain, of course, I mean, FrightFesters will know because we showed Territories and Hobo with a Shotgun that he did amazing lighting for. So, Karim, I mean, you wanted to go back to directing with this one, so tell us about the idea behind your story and exactly, you know, why you wanted to get involved.
You know, for me these days directing is kind of just like a side thing I'll do occasionally. Really, my proper career is as a cinematographer, lighting cameraman, call it what you will. And, you know, occasionally it's fun to go back and kind of explore stories. You know, I mean, these days my philosophy is I will only direct a story if I absolutely must do it. And this one was based on a feature script that I had laying around for probably about 11 years, something like that at this point, that I absolutely must do. And it was something that, you know, was really tough to finance. It is a movie basically about somebody addicted to other people's vitreous fluid in their eyeballs to try to capture the memory, the history kind of encased within, and pull it out like an opiate and inject it like heroin in her own eyeballs, see what they've experienced, and then write down their stories. So a bit of a weird one, kind of a tough one to pitch to Disney. So you know, when David came up and just sort of mentioned it, it was just a fantastic opportunity to kind of adapt one of your older stories and to go out and just do it with total creative freedom. I mean, it's so rare these days when you have an opportunity to have complete and total creative freedom. So, you know, although it was a low-budget movie, that was the one thing we wouldn't have 12 producers behind our backs telling us what to do.
I mean, just let me pass on to one of my, you know, oldest friends, Buddy Giovinazzo, who I've loved forever, and he's involved in this as well. I mean, Buddy, I mean, do you like the anthology format, and why do you find it so useful? And, you know, we need a proper horror film from you, so please do one.
Well, you know, I sort of, when I was a kid, I saw Tales from the Crypt, and it really scared the hell out of me. The skeleton on the motorcycle, even to this day, is such a frightening image to me. It's tattooed on my brain. So I've always liked the anthology. You know, especially for somebody like myself, my films tend to be dramatic with like explosive violence, and so the short film for me was perfect. I didn't think I would like to do another short film, but actually this format for me was perfect because I could do something that was realistic and dramatic as well, and real people, and then have it explode into this you know, romantic bloodbath, so to speak. So, you know, I think what we all thought was we weren't sure how it was going to come together, all of us, because I think I came on last, David, if I'm correct. I think so. Yeah, you guys had your scripts already, because I remember when I first got the phone call, I received from either you or Evan, I received a bunch of scripts. I remember I read your script. I don't think I read yours yet, but I read Doug's. And so I thought, like, wow, you know, this stuff is really ambitious, because we had no money. And I was thinking, oh my God, how are we going to do this? And you know, I wasn't sure if I could do it, but it's funny because I Love You, the piece that I wrote, was written completely for this project. It wasn't anything I had ever thought about. It wasn't like on the shelf. You know, every filmmaker, we all have many projects on the shelves that we'd love to make, and this wasn't one of them. And I think because of the anthology, the opportunity to do a short film like that, it just came out somewhere from my deepest psychosis. I don't know where it came from.
But if it was like a small budget film, how could you afford the multi-talented music of Simon Boswell? I mean, and why did you? And Simon, I mean, you've done a lot of the you know, how many of the films did you do?
Two.
You did two of them. So why
yeah.
were you involved, and how did it all come about? Ah, you got involved because of Richard Stanley, one of the directors.
Well,
who
actually,
isn't with us
no.
today.
Well, no. Actually, no. It was really through David I became involved because we were talking about the first US release of Santa Sangre, for which I'd written the music years ago, and I think we were talking at that point about.
Yeah, I think Richard had you in mind all along.
Richard,
anyway.
you know, always has me in mind, and I think Richard's had a really kind of rough ride in terms of his career for a number of reasons, some of which, you know, partly his fault. But you know, I think he's a really talented director. So I came on, and I've written music for everything that Richard's ever done. So it just felt natural. And then through coincidences, which were that Karim was shooting Richard's film. And I went down to France and hung out at the set and met Karim. And Karim at the same time had just shot Hobo with a shotgun and was trying to get in touch with me to license the song from the Argento film, which was the first film I ever did. So it was all kind of a series of people knowing each other. But both you guys, Richard and Karim, they wanted me to do the old 80s glory stuff, you know, which I'd long since sold all those synthesizers. And, you know, so it was a real challenge for me to try and recreate the what Karim called the ah sound.
The Boswell ah.
The Boswell ah sound, which, you know, sadly was being used by every fucking composer in the world at that point who owns certain makes of synthesizers. But no, it was interesting because Karim's and Richard's a very different kind of music from me. But it's always good to revisit the old stuff that you're ashamed of.
David, let me ask you, because I mean, anthology films these days, I'm talking about in specific reference to like Little Deaths, they just sort of like bang, 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 they're off. But you actually decided to do a wraparound story, which is actually quite unusual. So why did you decide to do that, and how did you get Udo Kier to do it?
I always thought there had to be a wraparound story just because of the nature of the way that the film was going to be put together with so many different styles of the filmmakers that were involved, and I didn't want it to seem just like a collection of shorts. So to have the wraparound, the thing that joined everything together, which was directed by Jeremy Caston, which was probably, you know, one of the biggest challenges of the whole thing, was to actually do something that connected all these very varied shorts together. Was something I always wanted to do, and it certainly goes back to all the anthology horror movies that I love. All the Amicus ones always have, you know, Peter Cushing in the old Curiosity Shop, or even Dead of Night has the whole framing story with the guy remembering his dream and stuff like that. So it was never a question that I wanted to wrap around, and we did want somebody who was kind of iconic to be the master of ceremonies, and it was kind of difficult to find somebody with the resources that we had. And I think Udo Kier's name had come up a lot when we were trying to think of somebody, you know, who is somebody that genre people recognize, but isn't just somebody who's kind of a tired person who only shows up at conventions these days. And Buddy and I were having lunch kind of close to the end of the whole thing. And he said, well, have you thought about Udo Kier? And I was like, yeah, I don't think we'd be able to get Udo Kier. And he says, well, I know Udo from a couple of TV movies that we've done. Buddy gave him a call that night. I was talking to Udo. He liked the idea. He liked, you know, the whole creative freedom, the passion that was going behind this thing. And he was on set maybe a week later. It was really, and he was great. You know, he was really into it and came along to the premiere, was the life and soul of the party. And I think he does a fantastic performance. It was great.
Why don't you just tell briefly, you going to visit Udo? Why don't you tell Alan when you visited Udo the first time you had an envelope for him? I just think it's great.
Oh.
Yes, that's right. So I went to visit Udo in Palm Springs actually at both of his houses. He has a ranch because he's now a German cowboy, and he also has
He has the house in Silver Lake, right?
in Los Feliz. Yeah, yes, that
right.
too. But he also has a converted library where he keeps all his Warhols and Hockneys and things like that. Anyway, I went and met with him, and we had lunch, and I told him about it. I said, well, I'm going to pay you the money right now. Here's the envelope, and he's like, no, this is bad luck, and didn't take it.
He said, pay me after I work.
He said, pay me for my work. You know, so he was really a star.
I mean, let me ask Karim. I mean, the anthology format seems to be sort of like a quite popular one at the moment. We're seeing quite a lot of this. I mean, why is that? Is it because it can get like a diverse group of sort of like filmmakers together who've got individual names and put them together? Do you think that's one of the reasons why it's actually a popular way of working?
Well, I think it's sort of making a resurgence. I mean, I do think it's just a great format. I love anthology films, and I think it's just beautiful to sit down with something very varied. But I think just in terms of economy these days, there's a whole wave of new anthologies coming out where it is a way for films to be made reasonably inexpensively to get names, people who are used to doing larger feature films, because it's a much shorter time commitment for you to go in and do a little chunk of a film as opposed to spend years of financing it, see it all the way through post and everything. So I think one of the reasons why you're seeing all this stuff is people can take a much smaller time commitment. You could kind of, you know, weasel favors from people if it's a much shorter time commitment on the shooting level and post-production and everything. So each individual director can go and kind of pull their own strings to be able to make these movies. You know, I mean, there was still a budget. It wasn't like we were going out with nothing, you know, and there's a budget for Theatre Bazaar, but it wasn't a huge budget. And nowadays it's just an economical reality that people aren't paying the minimum guarantees that they used to. People aren't buying, you know, the downloading thing has really become a huge problem. And so it is sort of a sign of the times that a lot of these anthology movies are coming back, where a lot of individual camps can band together to get a feature out as opposed to just one large, expensive endeavor.
And I'd also add that, I mean, it's just a way that people can just do a kind of primal scream of a film that they probably wouldn't be able to get. They could spend years trying to get financed and never be able to do it the way that they would want to. Whereas in this format, it was actually perfect for that, because you can allow people, yes, we want that primal scream on film, you know, that's exactly what we're after.
And Buddy, say with your movie, I mean, is it a case of like making a full-length feature? It doesn't matter if you're making a short film or a full-length, the problems are still the same. Or was it easier for you to actually direct your short?
Yeah. It was, you know, I remember the first day I stood on set. We were in the bedroom in the apartment, and I was thinking, shit, man, I should be doing a feature, because it was just as big as doing a feature. It was the same crew. My wife Gazina was one of the producers. She produced with another woman named Kirsten Sorauer. So together they put together a feature film crew. And I'm standing there, we have the lights, the camera, the whole thing, the dolly, jib arms, and I'm thinking, shit, man, it's a feature. The difference is it was a 5-day shoot. So I think in my case, maybe within 2 months, we were pre-production, casted, shot, and edited, right? And then and that's one of the advantages. But it was the same amount of work. The only difference would have been if I had like 3 more weeks of shooting. It would have been a feature. But everything else was the same, Alan. The post was the same. I was shocked. I thought it was going to be like Combat Shock. I thought it was going to be like me and 4 friends, and we're just going to, you know, go out there. So in that way, it was an eye-opener for me. I didn't expect it, and I didn't expect it up until the first day. My wife was actually yelling at me the whole time because I was afraid nobody was going to show up. I remember the days of Combat Shock. I would meet crew people on my way to the set who say, "We'll see you in 10 minutes," and they never show up. So I was sort of expecting that. So she actually she was right. Everybody showed up, and it was a big team. It was you know, it was no different than doing a feature. Probably for you guys as well, right?
I mean, was it the same for you, Karim? Was it exactly the same?
Well, it depends of which one. Richard Stanley's was a much bigger machine, because we had to go, you know, in the Pyrenees and in the forest with the large generators, big dollies, tracks, and all that stuff. So it was a much bigger machine in terms of what needed to be moved.
And French porn stars.
And French porn stars,
yeah.
But that's another story.
There's a particular scene in there, which there was a body double.
Yeah.
I actually arrived 1 day late for that.
You
scheduling on
missed
your
the
part.
porn star, Lisa Crawford, the French porn star. But then from there, you know, for example, Douglas Buck's episode felt really quite big, even though there was a lot of younger, because it was in Canada, so it was a union show in terms of the actors, but in terms of the crew, we couldn't afford to have union rates, so it was a little bit smaller in terms of crew what we can have. In Europe, people are a little bit more willing to go, and because of the people are used to traditions in Europe of doing short films for no money, you know, so like people work on them or very little anyways, whereas in North America it's a little bit tougher on a certain level, but we still, you know, I mean, through Douglas's savvy and Rita, Douglas's wife, who was the first AD, and a fantastic line producer, Victoria Sanchez, we were able to close off a highway, direct traffic control, and, you know, I mean, during one scene, I won't talk about it because I don't want to spoil it, but in one specific scene, and if you saw the film, you know which scene, we actually fenced off half a highway and a large chunk of forest to keep something from escaping. So that was a large one, and Vision Stains was much more compact, but you know, I mean, in terms of everything, it felt like, you know, in terms of the amount of preparation, especially with the actors, Vision Stains, since I hadn't directed actors in a long time, I really, really went to town with them and really made sure to get the psychology correct. And, you know, it was compact. They were like low-budget features. You would go on a $500,000 to $1 million feature,
Sure.
Same thing.
So basically that's it from this lot. I mean, but when are we going to see the film? Is it out? When are you going to release it? What's going to happen?
We haven't actually decided what the release pattern's going to be over here in the UK yet. It looks like it'll be coming out in the US first quarter of next year, but nothing's actually concrete. But those details are all coming together at this time, so it will be pretty soon.
All right. Thank you, the Theatre Bazaar crew and Simon Boswell.